Okay, so now we are live. So my name is Chaitanya Chandra Das. So I started in Krishna consciousness in 92. I got a book in the street, like many devotees, right? And I started reading. I got a Bhagavad Gita first and a few smaller books. Later, I got a Srimad Bhagavatam, and I have been trying to understand the Srimad Bhagavatam since then. And in this course, I will try to share, something that I learned from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and try to help you to also understand this book, because Srimad Bhagavatam is such an important book. It's the book that really helps us to understand Krishna and helps us to understand all the bases of the philosophy. After a devotee understands well the Srimad Bhagavatam, he can study, all kinds of other books that he may want. But without these bases that the Srimad Bhagavatam gives, we are not going to really understand other books that we may study. So we'll start with some prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Jena Takshmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadate Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Pachitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasaji Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, just ask you to please keep your microphones off for now. I will be speaking for about 1 hour. I will be explaining, the main points today. And then after that, we will have like 1 hour or close to that more for questions and discussions and so on. So, okay. Okay, so now, so we can start. So today we start finally, right, our course on the Srimad Bhagavatam. We were waiting for some few weeks now since it was announced. And so this course I will follow this pattern that we will have first 1 hour or a little over 1 hour of general explanations. I will be, every meeting I will be explaining a few chapters or a few topics in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then after that, we have 1 hour more for questions. So this course will go on for about 2 years. So we will do like 108 meetings or something like that. That's the planet. That's the planet list. And the idea is to cover gradually all the 12 cantos. On the 10th canto, probably we'll go a little quick through all the pastimes of Krishna, because if we are going to enter into all the details of the pastimes, it's just going to take, one life to finish it, or several lives. But we try to go, at least get the main points of the pastimes of Krishna, like Prabhupada explains in the Krishna book. But I will be focusing more on like before the 10th canto and then the last two cantos in the end. And today I will explain why the Srimad Bhagavatam is considered the conclusion of the Vedas, and why the Srimad Bhagavatam is such an important book, even if compared with other books, other Puranas, the Upanishads, and so on. Why the Bhagavatam is considered so important. And it's actually said that you don't really need to study the Vedas. If you study the Srimad Bhagavatam, if you understand the Srimad Bhagavatam, you get everything that is really important in the Vedic literature. So the Bhagavatam is it's that important, right? So normally we will be having like 1 hour for explanations and then 1 hour for questions. But today we have a lot of material to cover, so maybe it will be a little more than 1 hour for the first section. Let's see. And so you can write down your questions or you can post them on the chat. And then when I finish with this first explanation, then we can go to the questions. Okay, so first of all, why the Srimad Bhagavatam is considered so important, right? That's what we will discuss today. So actually, it's said that Prabhupada says that only two books are needed. So first book is the Bhagavad Gita, right? Of course. And the second book is, of course, the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So, for example, on the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 1343, for example, Prabhupada wrote here on the screen that both the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam are like torch bearers for the blind people of this age. In other words, if men in this age of Kali want to see the real light of life, they must take to these two books only, and their aim of life will be fulfilled. Bhagavad Gita is the preliminary study of the Bhagavatam, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the summum bonum of life, Lord Sri Krishna personified. We must therefore accept Srimad Bhagavatam as the direct representation of Krishna. One who can see Srimad Bhagavatam can also see Lord Sri Krishna in person. They are identical, right? So here the real identity of Srimad Bhagavatam is revealed. Srimad Bhagavatam is nothing less than Krishna himself. Just like Krishna is the holy names, Krishna is also the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So by chanting the holy names and studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, we can get in direct contact with Krishna. And even if one doesn't have time to study any other book, like it's said that one can attain perfection just by studying Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is something that Srila Vyasadeva himself, he says, and that's Bhagavatam 1.1.2. He says that Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kingva Parir Ishvara. This beautiful Bhagavatam is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? And the words here, Kim va para ir, they literally mean what is the need of other scripture. This is literal meaning, that's not interpretation. And this comes directly from Vyasadeva, the person who compiled all the Vedas. And in the end, he says, actually, nothing of this is really necessary. You just study Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So, okay, so let's discuss about how to find perfect knowledge. And that's something that is very important for us, right? Where to find something that we can really believe that this is perfect knowledge. And so, to understand why the Srimad Bhagavatam is so important, it's interesting and very useful to understand a little about two other books, and that's the Vedanta Sutra by Vyasadeva and the Tattva Sandarbha by Srila Jiva Goswami. So in his Tattva Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami, he makes a long analysis of the process by which one can obtain knowledge, how to get perfect knowledge. And nowadays, of course, it's easy for us because we have the books of Srila Prabhupada, but before Prabhupada, it used to be harder. So the soul is originally not part of the material world, right? There is another reality, which is spiritual and transcendental. And the soul is originally part of this eternal spiritual reality, right? The soul is not from here. So the original identity of the soul is as an eternal servant of Krishna. But somehow, because of free will, the pure soul at some point leaves this original position and comes to the material world, right? How this happens, it's very difficult to understand, but it's like that. And here in the material world, the soul tries to enjoy the material nature and become an imitation ruler, right? Tries to imitate Krishna. Because the original ruler of everything is Krishna, right? But in this material world, we have some space to become like smaller rulers, right? We can take charge of a small family or a business or maybe even some city or some country, right? So we can have this illusion that, oh, I'm the ruler here. However, while we are here in this material world, our perfect spiritual nature is covered, and we assume like a temporary illusory material identity, which is formed by the false ego, the intelligence, the mind, and finally, the senses and the gross body, right? And at this point, right, when we assume all these coverings, we become affected by four material defects. And that's what we have here. Four defects of the conditioned souls, right? That's us. Like, congratulations for us, right? So the first defect is to commit mistakes, right? And none of us can say that we never made mistake. Like, oh, I'm perfect. I never made a mistake. Impossible, right? To err is human, right? Every person makes mistakes. And it's interesting that this applies not just for us, like human beings, but for all conditioned souls. Even great demigods like Indra, Brahma, they make mistakes, right? So the second effect is to be illusioned, to be Maya, like to be in illusion. Illusion means to accept something that is not, right? This is called Maya. So, for example, we accept the body as ourself and we work so hard to maintain it, right? To maintain the body. We become conditioned by the idea of belonging to a certain country or a certain group, right? We become conditioned, or we become conditioned by the idea of being part of a certain family and so on. And this happen under the influence of illusion, right? Because all these identifications, they are temporary and they are connected with the body, right? I may think that, oh, I don't know, Brazilian, but next life, I don't know, I may be Argentinian or Mexican or African or anything, right? So all these identifications, they are connected with the body. So when we accept these identifications as our identity, this means Maya, this means illusion. So that's the second effect. And then there is a third effect that is the propensity to cheat others, right? We have this propensity to cheat others to get what we want. And for example, many false gurus, they come from India to the West, to teach some kind of adulterated philosophy, right? So they attract the public and then they use these people to fulfill their interests, right? Whatever it is. And of course, politicians, they also do this all the time, right? And this can happen in like a smaller scale, even inside families, right? Even inside families, sometimes one cheats the other. So cheating and manipulation are unfortunately very, very common in this world, right? And therefore, even if a person is very sincere about finding the truth, there is no guarantee that he will uh, find it because so many cheaters on the way, right? And finally, there is the fourth material defect. That is the fact that our senses are imperfect. And this includes also our material intelligence, right? So in this way, not only the tools that we use to get knowledge, right? The ears, the eyes, and so on, not only the senses, right? These tools that we use to get knowledge are imperfect, but also the tool that we use to process this information, which is our intelligence, right? It is also imperfect, right? It's also flawed. So in this way, we get some limited information using our eyes and ears, and then we use our limited, imperfect intelligence to process it. And in this way, we try to understand reality, right? We try to understand the world. However, our understanding of reality is always incomplete and incorrect because these tools, they are limited and they are propense to mistakes. So, and this affects not only like regular people, but also philosophers, scientists, and like I said, even great demigods like Indra and Brahma. So, for example, when Krishna appeared in Vrindavan, like 5,000 years ago, Brahma mistook him for a regular boy, right? For a normal boy. And he decided to test him by stealing his friends and his calves, right? And 1 year later, when Brahma returned to see, the result of his prank, right? He saw that Krishna, he had just expanded himself into many forms and he assumed all the forms of his friends and calves, and he was playing the same way as before. And to the surprise of Lord Brahma, each one of these expansions of Krishna was shown to be a Vishnu expanse. expansion, complete, right, with his own universe. Right? It's not just many forms of Vishnu, but each Vishnu had his own universe, and each universe was complete with his own Brahma, Shiva, all the demigods, different living entities, and so on. So Brahma, he was thinking that he was the only Brahma, and there was only one Lord Vishnu. You see, imperfection, mistake, right? But when he tried to prank Krishna, he saw that not only there were many Vishnus, but also many universes and many Brahmas, and all of them they were subordinate to Krishna, right? So, so considering that we have all these defects, what is the hope for us to get perfect knowledge, right? Because since all conditioned souls inside this universe, this material universe, they have these four defects, it's not possible for anyone to produce perfect knowledge. Anyone like here inside from inside the universe to produce perfect knowledge, like not possible for any conditioned soul. So in this way, perfect knowledge, it needs to be imported. It needs to come from outside. So only Krishna himself or his pure devotees coming from the spiritual world, they can come and transmit this, introduce this pure, perfect knowledge, right? And this brings us to the Vedas, right? Haribo. So Vedas, they are considered perfect knowledge, right? They are originally transmitted directly from Krishna to Lord Brahma. So in the Bhagavad Gita, 15:15, Krishna says that by all the Vedas, I am to be known, right? Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So Krishna declares this himself. So and this is not an exaggeration, right? Krishna is the one who originally transmitted the Vedic knowledge, right, to Brahma. And he also came as Vyasadeva to compile the Vedic knowledge when it was almost lost, at the end of Dwapara Yuga. And Krishna also spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, right, starting a new line of disciplic succession for the Bhagavad Gita, because the previous one had been lost, right? So Krishna himself or his pure devotees, they come to this universe to introduce this perfect spiritual knowledge, and then this knowledge is transmitted inside the universe through parampara. However, even when we study the Vedas, right, the four Vedas, it's not easy to find clear answers there, because the Rig, the Yajur, and the Sama Vedas, they deal mainly with like auspicious rituals, fruitive activities, mantras, things that we can use to attain material prosperity, promotion to the higher planets after death. And a great part of the Atharva Veda deals with material sciences like medicine, psychology. So actually, only a small portion of the verses of the original Vedas, they really speak directly about self-realization, right? And in fact, there are many philosophies that are based on the Vedas that are actually atheistic. They say that there is no God. Interesting, right? Because the Vedas, they are vague. So some people, they come to this conclusion. So for example, in his purport to Srimad Bhagavatam, that's 117. So Prabhupada explains that besides Vyasadeva, there are other sages who are the authors of 6 different philosophical systems, namely Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Patanjali, Jaimini, and Astavakra. Theism is explained completely in the Vedanta Sutra, whereas in other books of philosophical speculators, practically no mention is given to the ultimate cause of all causes, right, to Krishna. So one can sit on the Vyasasana only after being conversant in all systems of philosophy, so that one can present fully the theistic views of the Bhagavatam in defiance of all other systems. Interesting, right? So Prabhupada makes this point that we should be able to defeat, these atheistic systems and prove, what is the real goal of the Vedas. So these 6 philosophical systems that Prabhupada mentions here on this verse, they are these ones that you can see on the screen. So first of them is the Nyaya system by Gautama Rishi. Then the second is the Vaisesika system by Kanada Rishi. And then number 3 is the philosophy of Sankhya by the atheistic Kapila. There are two Kapilas, right? The Kapila, the son of Devahuti, that explained the real Sankhya. And then there is another Kapila that came later that was atheistic. And then we have the system of mystic yoga by Patanjali, the philosophy of karma mimamsa by Jaimini, and the philosophy of impersonalism, propounded by Astavakra and later by Sankaracharya. So these are 6 systems of philosophy that are based on the Vedas, but that are atheistic in nature, right? They come to the conclusion that there is no God, or that no, there is some force, but it's not a person, it's some kind of light, something like that. So different philosophies that come from India, they are divided in 2 groups. One group are the Astika philosophies, and these are philosophies that follow the Vedas. The other group are the Nastika philosophies, and these are philosophies that reject the Vedas. And so, for example, there are philosophies like Buddhism, Jainism, the philosophy of Charvaka Muni, and these are philosophies that just reject the Vedas. They don't accept the Vedas, they base their philosophy in something else, right? But different from these 6 systems that Prabhupada explains here, they are considered Astika philosophies because they accept the Vedas. They just come to the wrong conclusions, but they accept the Vedas and they study the Vedas. So all these 6 systems that Prabhupada mentions here, they are fundamentally atheistic, right? They study different aspects of material nature, but they do it separately from the Supreme Lord. So logic, meditation, and so on, these are also parts, right, of our spiritual studies and practice. But when we disconnect these things from Krishna, then they become just materialistic philosophies that have, very little purpose in bringing us back to Godhead, right? So although these philosophies, they come from the Vedas, they are based on the Vedas, but the conclusion is incorrect. And because of this, they don't help us much. So I will just give here a short introduction to these 6 philosophical systems, just for you to have an idea. Because of course, if we are going to start studying these 6 systems, we are going to forget about Bhagavatam because so much to study. But I'm just going to give you some introduction so you have an idea about that. So number 1 is this Nyaya system, right? And this Nyaya system of Gautama, it deals with reasoning and logic. So it deals with setting up rules for philosophical debates, identifying objects for discussion, etc. So the main concern of this philosophy is about establishing conditions for obtaining correct knowledge and the means how we do to receive this knowledge, right? Analyze nature and the source of different types of knowledge to determine, if they are correct or not correct, and so on. So it deals with logic like that. So logic, of course, has a very important role in the study of the Vedanta Sutra or the Upanishads, for example, because of course the Vedanta Sutra is full of logical arguments, back and forth. And these arguments, they help us to understand the Upanishads. But the problem of the Nyaya system is that it takes logic separately from Krishna. And of course, when you separate logic from Krishna, logic becomes just a tool for, pushing our own ego, right? Exerting our ego. And then we have number 2, that's the Vaisesika system. And this system was propounded by philosophers like Gautama and Kanada. And this system, it studies the material world in great detail, right? It tries to determine the causes and the effects of the material world and how to destroy material suffering, how one can become free from suffering, right? But so they conclude, from all this study, they conclude that ignorance is the root cause of all misery, right? And they believe that one can attain liberation only by cultivating the right understanding of reality, right? Not so far, right? Not so far. We also agree with that. So the main focus of this school is on studying the cause and effects of the material creation, and especially the material elements, right? So far, like no, okay, right? But the problem is the conclusion again. The conclusion is that the atomic combination of material elements, like the atoms, and the combinations between the atoms, is the original cause of creation. And this theory is called Paramanuvada. And it's actually similar to what, modern physicists believe. What is believed in modern science? That there is actually no creator. It's just, matter organizes itself. So you see, it's an atheistic philosophy, although it's based on the Vedas. Then you have the Sankhya system, number 3. And that's an analytic study of the material elements. And although this Sankhya, this atheistic Sankhya, it bears the same name as the system that was introduced by Lord Kapila, right, the son of Devahuti, and we can find in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. This modern system, this atheistic Sankhya, was propounded by another Kapila. Right? Prabhupada calls him the impostor Kapila. And so, while the original Sankhya system that was taught by Lord Kapila, it studies the material elements with the ultimate purpose of, ascending, like going to a platform of devotional service, the system that was propounded by the atheist Kapila, it discards the existence of God, and it concludes that the material world is ultimately illusory, right? And the causes of this material manifestation are also illusory, and the ultimate goal is just some kind of voidism that you just basically stop existing, right? So that's another atheistic system. Then we have number 4, that is the process of a mystic yoga of Patanjali. And of course, the process of mystic yoga is offered in the Vedas as bona fide processes of self-realization. Like, for example, Krishna himself, he describes the system of Astanga yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, right? So yoga is bona fide, right, by itself. Yoga means originally to link our consciousness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? Reviving our spiritual identity. So, yoga is a bona fide process of self realization. But the system that is counted in this list, that is counted amongst these 6 philosophical systems, is the Patanjala Yoga. And that's the system propounded by Patanjali in his Patanjala Yoga Sutra. And this system is focused in examining the nature of the mind, right? How the mind works, the impediments that the mind creates, the causes of material suffering, and so on. And the ultimate goal of this system is Kaivalya, impersonal liberation, right? Brahma Jyoti. There is no Krishna, again. So, no, there is some idea of liberation, but there is no idea of God as a person. And then we have the system of karma mimansa. That's number 5. And that's a system propounded by a sage called Jaimini. And this is a very popular system. So this is a philosophical school that stresses fruitive activities. So for them, the results of our material activities, they are supreme, right? Even if there is a God, he's just an order supplier, right? He just delivers the result of karma. Karma is supreme in this philosophy, right? So according to this system, there is no need to become a devotee of God, right? One should just follow moral principles, perform pious activities, and be happy in this world by receiving the results of our good karma, right? So that this system is basically atheistic. There is no God in this system. And even if there is a God, he's not really God because he is subordinate to karma. And then number 6, and that's the last system, that is the interpretation of the Vedanta. Like when we speak Vedanta, we speak about the study of the Vedas, culminating with the Vedanta Sutra. So Vedanta, Vedantist, these are just the Vedas and the people who study the Vedas, the term itself. But of course, nowadays, Vedanta is very much connected with the Advaita school, the Mayavadis, right? Because they call themselves Vedantists. But actually, Vedanta just means the Vedas. So the last system that I was explaining is the interpretation of the Vedanta propounded by impersonalists, right? Such as Astavakra and more recently, Sankaracharya. And they reject the idea of the absolute truth being a person, right? And they accept the impersonal Brahman effulgence, that is just, the effulgence of Krishna's body, as being the cause of everything. So again, there is no personal God, right? There is just this energy, this Brahma Jyoti. So according to this theory, the material manifestation is temporary and unreal, two characteristics. And only the Brahman effulgence is reality, right? Brahman is real, everything else is illusion. So just like in the Patanjala Yoga system, the ultimate goal in this system is impersonal liberation, right? Merging into the light of the Brahmajyoti. And the most dangerous concept in this philosophy is the theory that when God comes to this material world as an incarnation, right? When he comes as Krishna or as Varaha, or when God comes to this world, their idea is that he accepts a material body created by the three modes of material nature. In other words, when God comes, he also falls in Maya, just like us. That's their conception. So the idea is that Maya is greater than God. And because of this, their philosophy is called Maya Vada, the philosophy that says that Maya is supreme. So Lord Chaitanya condemned this philosophy as, the most offensive. And also, in the Bhagavad Gita, also, Krishna states that when the personality of Godhead descends in a human form, fools and rascals deride him. So these are the Mayavadis directly. Bhagavad Gita directly speaks about the Mayavadis, right? So, okay, so these are the six systems, right? And apart from these six, there is the philosophy of Brahma Mimamsa, or the real Vedanta. And that's the philosophy of Srila Vyasadeva, right? Haribo, that's what we want to study. And this philosophy of Brahma Mimamsa, right, of Vyasadeva, brings us to the ultimate conclusion of the absolute truth, the ultimate conclusion about God. So sometimes the Vedanta philosophy is counted amongst the six systems, but this just depends on how you count. If you count it together with the impersonalism of Astavakra or separately. So, but this is just a detail, right? So in this way, Vyasadeva, he appears in the end of Dwapara Yuga, right? These systems that I explained here, the six systems, actually they are not new. They existed even before the beginning of Kali Yuga. It's just that, with the beginning of Kali Yuga, they became more they became more popular. But even before Kali Yuga, they were popular already. And Vyasadeva, he mentions these systems in his books because Vyasadeva is already compiling the Vedas with the idea of defeating these philosophical systems. So from this, we can see that even when one has the access, to the knowledge of the Vedas, it's not so easy to find the truth because the knowledge of the Vedas, it can be easily misinterpreted. The knowledge is perfect, but the problem is that if an imperfect person tries to understand the Vedas, he may come to some imperfect conclusion because of his imperfect intelligence, right? And that's one of the reasons why Vyasadeva compiled the Upanishads, right? We know that there are 18 Puranas, 108 Upanishads, right? So that's one of the reasons that Vyasadeva compiled these 108 books, these Upanishads. And later he compiled also the Vedanta Sutra. His idea was to make this spiritual knowledge that is hidden in the Vedas more evident. However, the Puranas, they offer spiritual knowledge in a format that is easier to understand than the Upanishads and the original Vedas. And therefore, the Puranas, they are recommended to us, to the people of Kali Yuga, right? So in this way, the Puranas are the most direct path back to Godhead. And this is part of what Jiva Goswami, the argumentation that Jiva Goswami makes in his in his Tattva Sandarbha. So there is in the Tattva Sandarbha, that's 13.1, Srila Jiva Goswami, he explains that the Puranas, they were originally spoken as a single scripture, as a book. Yes, as a single book, right? And this book, this original Purana, it contained 1 billion verses. You know, there is 1,000, 1 million, 1 billion, 1 billion verses. You can imagine the size, right? 1 billion verses. And this Purana, this original Purana, is still recited and studied in the celestial planets, right? And because, of course, there, the demigods, they have access to many other Vedic texts that we don't know here, right? But of course, in our planet, you know, to study a book of 1 billion verses, it would be a little bit complicated, probably, right? Maybe we will not have time for that. So here is Srila Jiva Goswami speaking, right? He says that we can understand the Vedas through the Puranas. So we are getting close, right? We started on the 4 Vedas, we passed it through the Upanishads, through the Vedanta Sutra, now we are getting close. Jiva Goswami says that, yeah, actually, if you go directly to the Puranas, it's easy to understand. So he says here, that's Tattva Sandarbha 13.1. Therefore, the Prabhasa Kanda of the Skanda Purana states, long ago, Lord Brahma, the grandfather of the demigods, performed severe penances, and as a result, the Vedas appeared, along with their 6 supplements and their Pada and Krama texts. Then the entire Purana emanated from his mouth, composed of eternal sound and consisting of 1 billion verses. It is the unchanging sacred embodiment of all scriptures. So here, Srila Jiva Goswami reveals the secret that, you know, the Puranas, they are actually the conclusion of the Vedas. So yeah, Bhagavatam is one of the 18 Puranas, right? So we are getting close. So as I said, the Puranas, they were originally composed of 1 billion verses. And of course, understanding that it would be like impossible for people of Kali Yuga to study such a, you know, extensive book, Vyasadeva, he compiled the 18 Puranas with selected passages from this original book. And together they contain about 400,000 verses, like the 18 Puranas together. And this is about, you know, 0.04% of the total, right? And so of the 18 Puranas, 6 of them contain instructions for people in the mode of ignorance. Then we have 6 for people in the mode of passion and 6 for people in the mode of goodness, right? So we have the Tamasic Puranas, the Rajasic Puranas, and the Sattvic Puranas. So this explains why there is sometimes disagreement between the Puranas. So some Puranas, they prescribe, you know, fruitive activities, they prescribe worship of demigods, you know, to Lord Shiva, to Surya, this happens because they just offer processes of worship that are appropriate according to the public they are destined to, right? When you are preaching to people in mode of ignorance, maybe you are not going to say exactly the same thing that you are going to say if you preach to great sages, right? You need to say what is relevant for the people you are preaching to. So the Puranas, they follow this rule, right? So because they give instructions to different types of people, so some passages, they may look contradictory, may look that there is contradiction in the Puranas. So for example, in one place it may be said to not worship demigods, and in another place it may be said to worship Lord Shiva or Surya, for example, right? Because it's for different types of people, right? But when one understands the purpose of these different Puranas, then everything becomes clear, right? Then it becomes easier to understand. So Srila Prabhupada mentions that in other Puranas, there are different methods set forth by which one can worship the demigods. But in the Bhagavatam, Here I'm reading from Prabhupada. But in the Bhagavatam, only the Supreme Lord is mentioned. The Supreme Lord is the total body, and the demigods are the different parts of that body. Consequently, by worshiping the Supreme Lord, one does not need to worship the demigods. The Supreme Lord becomes fixed in the heart of the devotee immediately. And that's Prabhupada in the purport of Bhagavatam 112. Okay, so okay, finished the quotes now. So in this way, if we are interested in learning about Krishna, right, even the 400,000 verses of the Purana, they are not really necessary. The Puranas, they speak about other things apart from Krishna also. Just by studying these 18,000 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have access to the conclusion, to the cream of the cream, right, of the Vedic literature. Now, Bhagavatam focuses only in the most important passages, right? And the conclusion of Srila Jiva Goswami is that we can get everything by just studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, like I said, if you want to study with the 4 Vedas and then Upanishad, Vedanta Sutra, all the Puranas, okay. But if you want to just understand directly about Krishna, you can go directly to the Srimad Bhagavatam after studying the Bhagavad Gita, right? And then another book that is useful for us to understand a little bit about, that is related to the Srimad Bhagavatam, is the Vedanta Sutra. And the Vedanta Sutra, it was a book compiled by Vyasadeva as the conclusion of the Vedas, right? So Vyasadeva, he compiled the most important parts of the original Vedas in the form of the Upanishads, right? 108 Upanishads. And these Upanishads, they are like short books that bring the ultimate conclusions of the Vedas. And the Vedanta Sutra is another, small book that offers the ultimate conclusions of the Upanishads and clears, many common misconceptions about the Upanishads. And so the Vedanta Sutra, it brings the ultimate philosophical conclusions of the Vedas in a very compact form, very short form. So the Vedanta Sutra is composed of just about 555 sutras. And sutras, they are shorter than verses. Like usually verses, they have 4 lines. Sutras, usually they have just 1 line. So for example, here we have some of the sutras of the Vedanta Sutra in English translation, direct English translation. So the Vedanta Sutra, it starts with the Sutra Atato Brahma Jigyasa, right? And the translation is that now it's time to inquire about Brahman. Now it's time to understand Brahman, right? Now that we came to human life, now it's the time. And of course, this sutra, right? This first sutra is an invitation to properly use our human form of life, right? To try to understand Krishna, the absolute truth, right? Come out of the cycle of birth and death. And then the Vedanta Sutra continues with the Sutra Jamadi Asya Yataha. And this second sutra, it starts to describe this absolute truth, right? It says that from him, everything emanates, right? So, okay, interesting, right? Everything comes from this absolute truth. Okay, where I can understand more about him. And this is explained in the third sutra, Shastra Yonitvat, that he can be known through the Shastras. Okay, so I should study about Brahman, about the absolute truth. Absolute truth is the one from who everything comes. He's the creator of everything, and he can be understood through the Shastras, through the Vedas, right? Especially through the Upanishads. Okay, and then one can argue that the Shastras, they offer different arguments, and many arguments, they appear to be contradictory. Like one place says, don't worship demigods, the other place says, worship Surya. So, sometimes it's said that Vishnu is God, sometimes in another place it's said that Shiva is God or Surya is supreme. So how can we understand all these apparent contradictions in the Vedas? And then this is answered in the fourth sutra. Tatsu samanyayat. And the conclusion, this verse says that we can understand Brahman by harmonizing the different statements from the Shastras. Means we need to study everything and harmonize all these different apparent contradictions. And then we can find, what is really the correct truth. So no, it goes like this, right? So in other words, this fourth sutra, it says that we can't take just one isolated passage from the Shastras as the answer for anything. You can't use isolated passage to prove anything. It doesn't prove anything. You need to study the context. You need to study the whole context, examine the whole context of the book, the whole context of the passage as a single unit, and then you can arrive to the right conclusions. If you just take one part of the text and you try to use to prove something, it will be wrong. It will be probably incorrect, right? And that's what we do all the time, right? Famous battles of quotes amongst devotees is because we don't follow this principle. Interesting, right? So in this way, the Vedanta Sutra, it offers a series of conclusions, right, about the absolute truth in very short, very concise aphorisms, sutras that needs to be very attentively studied, right? And usually people think that the Vedanta Sutra supports the idea that God is impersonal, right? Because when we speak about Vedanta Sutra, you think that, oh, Mayavadi, impersonalism, Brahman, and so on. And this is a false conception. That's because the Sariraka Bhasya, the interpretation of Sankaracharya, became very popular, right? But that's actually not the case. Sankaracharya, he intentionally covered the real meaning of the Vedanta Sutra with an imaginary interpretation because he had the mission of attracting people from Buddhism to the Vedas. So he preached a philosophy that was kind of similar to Buddhism, but was based on the Vedas. And he wrote this philosophy, he used it, the Vedanta Sutra out of context to support this philosophy, right? So the story of Sankaracharya is that with the beginning of Kali Yuga, people gradually forgot the purpose of the Vedas, and they started using passages of the scriptures to just justify their sinful activities. People, they became used to eating meat, and they started justifying, this killing of animals using passages from the Vedas that explain about animal sacrifice, because of course this is also included in the Vedas, right? Sacrifice of animals. So people said, oh, Vedas say like this, Vedas say like that. So they started using these as an excuse, right? And at this point, this was like in the beginning of, closer to the beginning of Kali Yuga, right? First 3,000 years of Kali Yuga. So at this point, Krishna, he came as Lord Buddha to teach non-violence, right? So he wanted to stop this animal killing. And of course, Lord Buddha, he was successful in his mission. But in the process, he had to reject the Vedas because people insisted in animal killing by using the Vedas as support, right? So he had to reject the Vedas. No more Vedas, just follow me, right? That was Lord Buddha. And there is a famous passage in the Padma Purana that mentions that Sankaracharya is actually an incarnation of Lord Shiva. And he came with the mission of reestablishing the authority of the Vedas, bringing the Vedas back, right? And for this purpose, he created a philosophy that is similar to Buddhism and therefore, sounded, familiar and attractive to the people of the time, right? But that was based on the Vedas, especially on the Vedanta Sutra. And in this way, he brought India back to the Vedas, and he paved the way to other acharyas like Madhavacharya, Ramanujacharya, and so on, to gradually bring back the correct interpretation of the Vedas. And this led to a long succession of powerful acharyas, culminating with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? And each one of these acharyas, he brought a part of the ultimate conclusion, right? Each one brought a part of the puzzle, and ultimately leading to the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which of course brought the ultimate conclusion of the Vedas, right? So, however, that's something that we can discuss a little later. The conclusion that God is a person, that God is Krishna, is actually very clear in the Vedanta Sutra itself, Actually, you don't need to go very far, right? And okay, I will just tell you a small story, to illustrate this point. How is that the Vedanta Sutra explains about Krishna? So the story is that once there was a group of Mayavadis that were connected to some important university in India, and they challenged Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura to a debate on the Vedas. And of course, the Mayavadis, they are well known for having this impersonal interpretation of the Shastras, right? They defend that the absolute truth is impersonal, and all forms and variety, they exist only under the influence of Maya, illusion, right? So they say, like the Mayavadis, they say that even the incarnation of Lord Vishnu and other avatars, they accept material bodies and they perform their activities under the influence of the three modes, right? So in other words, their philosophy is that even when the Supreme Brahman appears in this world, he does it under the influence of Maya. That's why we call them Mayavadis, right? Because their philosophy concludes that Maya is greater than God. So, and of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, he was famous for teaching the theistic Vaishnava interpretation of the Shastras, right? God is a person, God is a blue boy. And of course, and this interpretation, this Vaishnava interpretation is based mainly on the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So when he was challenged by these Mayavadis, he very quickly answered that, yeah, I'm ready anytime, right? Just tell me where and when I will be there. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was ready to defeat these Mayavadis. So he sent the answer back, but the Mayavadis, they took weeks to answer. And instead of offering a time for the debate, they wrote another message telling him that he could not use verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam and from the other Puranas, only Vedanta Sutra and Upanishads, right? And of course, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural interpretation of the Vedanta Sutra, right? It was written by Vyasadeva himself. But the Mayavadis, they don't accept, Srimad Bhagavatam very well, because it's very difficult for them to maintain, their philosophy when confronted with the verses of the Bhagavatam, because the verses of the Bhagavatam are very direct, right? So, like, right in the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right, Srila Vyasadeva, he completely destroys the Mayavadi philosophy, right? He defines that Brahman is the supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna, who has not only a personal form, but is also full of opulences and transcendental activities. So it destroys the idea that, God is impersonal, and destroys the idea that God falls into Maya, right? And of course, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, again, he accepted. He said, okay, anytime, I'm ready to debate. And if the Mayavadis, they objected to the use of the Puranas, no problem. They could debate on other books. They could debate on the Upanishads, no problem. But apparently, the Mayavadis, they were a little bit concerned about their capacity of defeating him after imposing, all these artificial limitations, because they took a long time to answer. And finally, they sent him a third message saying that, after careful deliberation, they concluded that the debate would be conducted exclusively on the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra. So only the Vedanta Sutra, no other book would be accepted, right? No verses from Upanishads, Mahabharata, Puranas, or any other books could be quoted. And again, surprisingly, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, he answered that he was ready to debate with them at any time. He was ready to defeat Mayavada philosophy using just the Vedanta Sutra. Interesting, right? And normally, Vaishnavas and other theistic philosophers, they contest the Mayavada philosophy by using verses from different shastras that emphasize, this personal aspect of God. Because although God has also an impersonal aspect, the personal aspect prevails, right? Krishna has his effulgence, but ultimately Krishna is a person, right? And so, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, right? For example, Krishna directly says that he is the he's the source or the basis for the impersonal Brahman, and that's Brahmano hi pratistaham. That's Bhagavad Gita 14:27. But and the Vedanta Sutra, however, it speaks about God in an indirect way. It refers to God as the supreme Brahman, the one who has no material qualities. So it's vague. And the Mayavadis, they hold very well to their philosophy when using the Vedanta Sutra because they can distort the meaning of the verses. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he was confident that he could defeat them using their own book. Like, how is it possible, right? Interesting, right? And the truth is that when the direct meaning of the verses is accepted, right? The direct meaning of the Vedanta, the verses of the sutras of the Vedanta Sutra is accepted, it becomes clear that the Vedanta Sutra, it doesn't at all support the Mayavada interpretation. The Mayavada philosophy is an artificial interpretation of the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads. The verses of the Vedanta Sutra, they speak about a personal conscious God who can be approached through the practice of devotional service. It's clear there. So Sankaracharya, he had to go through, great lengths in his commentary of the Vedanta Sutra to sustain his ideas by using a very indirect and contradictory interpretation. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he debated with many great, Mayavadis of his time, right? And he was able to easily defeat the greatest, logicians of his time by just offering a direct and logical interpretation of the Vedanta Sutra, right? That's what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, he was confident that he could do the same. But the Mayavadis, they were not very confident because they retracted their invitation. Okay, no. So they admitted defeat right even before the discussion began. Right? They saw that they will not be able to defeat Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, even just on the Vedanta Sutra. So if you are curious about how it's possible to defeat Mayavada philosophy using the Vedanta Sutra itself, I have a small demonstration at the end of this presentation. That's based on what Prabhupada says on Teaching of Lord Chaitanya. So, if you are curious, we can go through it quickly in the end. I just have a few other things to cover before that. So, okay, so now let's go to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So after his debate with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prakashananda Sarasvati, who was one of the greatest, Mayavadis of his time, he was forced to admit that whatever, this is okay. This is Prakashananda Sarasvati speaking. That was one of the greatest Mayavadis of his time. After speaking with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was forced to say this. Whatever you have said concerning discrepancies in the Mayavada philosophy is also known by us. Indeed, we know that all the commentaries on the Vedic scriptures by Mayavadi philosophers are erroneous, incorrect, especially those of Sankaracharya. Sankaracharya's interpretations of the Vedanta Sutra are all figments of his own imagination, right? It's not the correct interpretation. So you have not explained of the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra and verses of the Upanishads according to your own imagination, but have presented them as they are. Thus, we are all pleased to have heard your explanation, right? Interesting, right? And then a little later, he added that we have given up the actual path of spiritual realization. We simply engage in nonsensical talk. Mayavadi philosophers who are serious about attaining benediction should engage in the devotional service of Krishna. But instead, they take pleasure in useless argument only. We hereby admit that the explanation of Sankaracharya hides the actual import of Vedic literature. Only the explanation given by Chaitanya is acceptable. All other interpretations are useless, right? Interesting, right? So this is about the correct interpretation of the Vedanta Sutra. And then this brings us back to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai, so now we are entering the final part of this presentation. So, because the real meaning of the Vedanta Sutra is so difficult to understand, Srila Vyasadeva, he was instructed by his guru, right, Narada Muni, to compile another book, right, that would directly speak about the glories of devotional service and the pastimes of Krishna, right, making the real meaning of the Vedanta Sutra easily available. So Narada Muni ordered Vyasadeva to write a book that would be easier, that anyone could understand, right? And that's the Srimad Bhagavatam. So by the time that he received this instruction, right, Vyasadeva, he had already compiled the original Bhagavata Purana as part of the original 18 Puranas. But after receiving this instruction, he had the inspiration to rewrite the book as the Srimad Bhagavatam that we have today, right? And in this process, he received the help of two other great sages, right? And these were his son, Sukadeva Goswami, and Sutta Goswami, the son of Ramaharshana, right? And these two great sages, they added their own realizations to the book, and they made this book even sweeter than originally. So the Srimad Bhagavatam was originally taught by Srila Vyasadeva to Sukadeva Goswami, and he added his own realization while describing the book to Maharaja Parikshit. And then this narration was later expanded by Sutta Goswami, and this resulted in the final text. That these are the verses that we have, right, in the Bhagavatam. And these original verses, in turn, they were commented by different Vaishnavacharyas, culminating with Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada, he compiled all this knowledge accumulated over, thousands of years, so many powerful acharyas coming and going. So he combined everything in his purports, adding, of course, his own realization there also. So the Bhagavatam that we have with the commentaries of Srila Prabhupada is the fruit of the combined effort of all these powerful personalities, 5,000 years of powerful acharyas, everything combined in just one set of books, right? So the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is the authorized commentary on the Vedanta Sutra and the ultimate conclusion of the Vedas. So this whole presentation, I'm trying to prove this to you. So you have this very clear, this idea that I don't need other books. I need to study Srimad Bhagavatam, right? After I study Srimad Bhagavatam, maybe I can study other books. That's okay. But my first priority in life is to really understand the Srimad Bhagavatam, because that's the path to understand the Vedas. So the philosophy of the Srimad Bhagavatam was explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right, in the end of this line, and he made this conclusion even more clear, right? And of course, Prabhupada incorporates this also in his purports. So Srila Prabhupada, he explains that the Bhagavad Gita is the ABCD of spiritual life, right? And the Srimad Bhagavatam is the graduation, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita is the post-graduation. So we often think that, Chaitanya Charitamrita is just a book of pastimes, right? But if we really read attentively, the whole text, including all the purports, we can see that it's actually a very, extremely deep book. And it has many philosophical details that are actually quite hard to understand. And this is so because Prabhupada wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita for postgraduate students. So the idea is that after studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, right, we can get, know the Srimad Bhagavatam, we can get, the conclusions of all the previous acharyas, right? And then we can deepen even more our spiritual realization after that by studying the Chaitanya Charitamrita and get more, going more deep in the philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? So for example, Srimad Bhagavatam 117, for example, Srila Prabhupada mentions that Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentation on the Brahma Sutra or the Badarayani Vedanta Sutras. It is called natural because Vyasadeva is the author of both the Vedanta Sutras and Srimad Bhagavatam, or the essence of all Vedic literatures. Right? So the connection between the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Vedanta Sutra, it becomes very evident right in the first verse. So the second aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra, right? I have here on the slide. So the second aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra, you may remember, is Jamadi Asya Yataha, right? And that's the beginning of the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. You see, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and then Jamadya Yasya Yato. It's the same verse from the same sutra from the Vedanta Sutra is included here, right? And if this verse, if we want to pronounce this verse, it follows the same metric that we use to chant the Sad Goswami Astaka, right? Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro. So I'm not like very good in chanting Sanskrit verses, but just to try to give you an idea, we'll try to do this one, and you can get the metric that we use for these very long verses, like the first verse. So Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and then starts Jamma Jasa Yatonya Vaditaratas Charteshva Bhigya Swarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yatsuryaya Tejo Vari Mridanyata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisa Damna Swena Sada Nirasta Kuhakang Sacham Parandi Mahi. So this is like metric for this type of verses, right? These verses that are very long. So it's good to learn these different metrics because when we find the correct metric, it makes much easier to pronounce the verses. If you try to pronounce this verse using a different metric, it becomes very difficult, right? So learning to pronounce Sanskrit verses is like it's not easy, but it's not like very hard also. It just requires learning the pronunciation of different syllables, and then these metrics, these different rhythms that we can use to different verses according to the length of the verses. Okay, anyway, this is the detail. So the second verse of the Vedanta Sutra is the beginning of the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And both explain the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the difference is that the Vedanta Sutra is vague. It's very vague. While the Srimad Bhagavatam explains directly about the nature of the absolute truth, like in detail, right from the start, very directly. So we can see here, for example, this is a comparison. So here we have the first 8 sutras of the Vedanta Sutra, right? This is my translation. I try to make it direct. And then we have the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So just to give an idea of how these two books are connected, but at the same time how they are different, let's just study these first 8 sutras and the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is Vedanta Sutra, right? 111 to 118. So now it's time to inquire about Brahman. He's the one from whom everything emanates and can be known by through the Shastras by the harmony of different statements. Brahman is not inexpressible in words. Even if described in words, he doesn't become covered by the material modes, because Brahman is non-material and existed before the material modes were created. One who concentrates on him attains liberation, and this is proved by the absence of contrary statements in the Shastras. So see, it's speaking about Krishna, but it's indirect, right? There is no direct mention there that, Krishna is a blue boy, plays the flute and so on. And then we come to Srimad Bhagavatam, first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, O my Lord, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna, because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent, because there is no other cause beyond him. Is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seeing fire or land seeing on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. Therefore, I meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. So you see, it's similar, but at the same time it's different, right? Both the Vedanta Sutra and the Srimad Bhagavatam speak about Krishna, right? But the Srimad Bhagavatam is much, much, much more direct, right? So it's much easier to understand Krishna by studying the Srimad Bhagavatam than by studying the Vedanta Sutra or even the Upanishads. So this first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, actually it has just like unlimited meaning, right? And especially when we include the purport of Srila Prabhupada. Once, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he gave a seminar of 30 days based on a single verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he said that if he would explain each verse, in detail, it will take 1 month for each verse. So you can imagine how much time it will take, right? You won't need to be a demigod to finish this study, right? However, to not make this presentation too long, I will just focus on like this course, like these 2 years that we are going to study together. I will just focus on some of the main points of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And today, of course, I will just explain some of the main points of this first verse. So later, you can come again to this first verse and see how much more you can understand the second time that you read it. Because the more we understand the Srimad Bhagavatam, the more we can appreciate each of the verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, including this first verse, and more meaning we can see, right, in this verse. So in this verse, you can see everything here on the screen, right? Sanskrit and translation. Unfortunately, the purport doesn't fit on the screen, right? But we'll just comment something about the verse. So here, Vyasadeva, he starts the verse with the sentence, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And this makes clear that he's speaking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not about some impersonal energy, some light, some lamp. No, he used the same sentence in the Bhagavad Gita, right? When Krishna speaks directly. And this also indicates that Sri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. See, everything is connected. And then next, in the verse, he explained that Krishna is the cause of all causes. Everything that exists has a cause, right? For example, the cause of my birth is my father, and the cause of his birth is my grandfather, right? So it goes like that. And the cause of a car is the company that produced it, right? And so on, right? So everything has a cause. But if we trace the origin of each one of these different causes, eventually we will come to Krishna, because Krishna is the original cause of everything else. Everything comes from Krishna, right? So everything that exists comes from Krishna's different energies. And everything that exists is thus part of his transcendental body. Right? Everything is included. Like actually, Krishna includes everything because everything is included in Krishna's energies. So in this way, Krishna is aware of everything that exists and everything that happens. So as the super soul, right? He's inside the hearts of everyone and even inside the atoms, right? However, at the same time, he's completely independent and completely free to act in any way he wants, in any way he desires. So Krishna is also the origin of all knowledge, right? So this transcendental knowledge is transmitted from Krishna to Brahma at the start of the creation, and from him, from Brahma, this knowledge gradually spreads through the universe. So Vyasadeva also mentions that Krishna is the controller of the illusory energy, Maya, right? So originally, we are all his servants, but when somehow or other we reject this position and we desire to become masters of this material world, we are put under the care of the illusory energy, right? And the spiritual potency, including the spiritual planets, is real, right? Of course. While the material potency that gives origin to the material universes is actually temporary and illusory, right? It's not unreal, but it's temporary and is illusory. So one may dream that he's Napoleon, for example, right? He's marching through Europe, right? But in reality, he never left his bed, right? He's in his bed. It's just that he's dreaming that he's Napoleon. Another example, a mirage in the desert, it may appear to be water, right? Real water, but it's not real water, right? Real water is somewhere else. Water exists. The mirage also exists, but it's not water. That's the problem. So in the same way, the happiness we find in this material world is just illusory. Real happiness is outside of it. So two important words in this verse that you are seeing on the screen is abhigya and swarat. And these two words, they describe the nature of the Supreme Lord. Interesting, right? Abhigya means fully cognizant, means he knows everything. And swarat means fully independent. So no other living entity can claim to be either abhigya, right, or swarat. No one is either fully cognizant or fully independent, right? Even Brahma, right? Brahma has to meditate on the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Lord, in order to create the universe. So this means that the Lord is the source of the powers of Brahma, as well as, of course, the powers of all the other demigods and other powerful living beings. And the word Dimahi also connects the Srimad Bhagavatam with the Gayatri mantra, right? That's another proof of the divinity of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so it reveals not only the ultimate purpose of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but the purpose of the Gayatri mantra itself. So the word Dimahi, we meditate, indicates the practice of devotional service as the ultimate goal of life. Now, fixing our attention on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus reconnect with our original nature as servants of Krishna. So, and the word Vasudevaya indicates that he directly addresses Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, as the Supreme Person, right? So according to him, Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. And all other forms and incarnations, even including Lord Vishnu, are his direct or indirect plenary portions or portions of the portion. That's the conclusion of Vyasadeva here in the Bhagavatam. And as we discussed previously, the Puranas, they are divided according to the modes of material nature, right? So some are direct to people in darkness, some to people in passion, some to people in goodness. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, however, he describes the Bhagavatam as the spotless Purana because it contains the transcendental narration of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, right? Without contamination of anything else. And this becomes clear on the second verse, right? We're almost finished, okay? I'm just going to explain the second and the third verse that are shorter, and then we finish for today and we go to questions. So, okay, second verse, it makes even more clear that the Bhagavatam speaks only about devotional service, only about what is pure. So this verse reads, Dharma projita kaita votra paramo nirmatsaranam satam vejam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapatrayom mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kimva Parair Svara Sajo Hridiya Varuja Tetrakritibi Susru Subistas Xanat. Okay, like I said, I'm not so good in Sanskrit, but no, I'm just trying to give you an idea. Later you can practice and you can pronounce it perfectly. So, the translation of this verse is completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality, distinguished from illusion, for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. So this beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for good realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Right? So if you want to see Krishna inside your heart, you see, that's the book to study. That's Vyasadeva himself speaking, right? He understands the Vedas better than anyone else. So most people, they are just interested in material happiness, right? They see money, big house, expensive car, social status, and so on, a source of happiness, right? And thus they desire these things. Okay. But so when these materialistic people, they turn to religion, they look for a system of worship that brings material results that they can use to increase, their material opulence, their status in society, and so on, be now or in the next life, right? And that's why more than 90% of the verses in the Vedas, they actually are dedicated to describing fruitive activities and ceremonies for bringing material results, which is collectively classified as karma kanda, right? This includes the worship of demigods and so on, right? Because that's the public, right? That's what people want. So these materialistic systems of religion, they are based on four principles: religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification and liberation. That's the idea of most people, right? So by becoming religious, one becomes pious, and then gradually, his economic situation improves, and this in turn allows him to enjoy life. And then after many lives, when he becomes frustrated with this material enjoyment, he may look for impersonal liberation, right, as a means of becoming free of the inconveniences of material life, right? That's the general idea of materialistic people. However, the Srimad Bhagavatam rejects these material systems of religion, including even the ones that are based on the Vedas, the ones that are based on Karma Kanda. That's what it says here: Dharma, Projita, Kaitavotra. All religiosity that is materially motivated is rejected. Prabhupada uses the word kicked out. That's that's modern English, right? So all of this is rejected in Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Instead, Bhagavatam speaks about the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are pure in heart. So we may then question how we can understand the Srimad Bhagavatam if we are not completely pure yet, right? We can, because Srimad Bhagavatam is so pure. If I'm not pure, how can I understand Srimad Bhagavatam? That's a good question, right? And this is answered a little bit later. That's Srimad Bhagavatam 1:18. And this is a verse that reveals a very important blessing. So this verse says, Natra prayeshu abhadreshu nicham bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamais loke bhaktir bhavati nastiki. So this verse says that by regular attendance in classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised, right, glorified with transcendental songs, is established as irrevocable fact, right? Is established as a fact in the heart. So the blessing is that by regularly studying the Srimad Bhagavatam and doing some service to advanced devotees, most of the contaminations in your hearts are destroyed. And this by itself allows us to attain instantly this level of purity that is necessary for successfully understanding the Srimad Bhagavatam and attain the fruit of this study, that is love of Godhead. So yes, Bhagavatam is a very pure text, and we need purity to study Bhagavatam. But we get this purity very easily just by studying the Bhagavatam and by serving pure devotees, even if just a little bit. That's what worked for Narada Muni, for example. We will see his story a little later, right? So, and this leads us to the third verse, that is the last verse that I want to speak about today. And this verse, of course, is much shorter, so it's pronounced in a different metric than the first two. So, Nigama Kalpa Taror Galitam Palang Sukha Mukad Amrita Drava Samyutam Pibatas Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam Muhur Ahorasika Bhuvi Pavoka. And then the translation is, "O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls." So with this, Vyasadeva, he concludes, right, this short preface of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Okay, no, this is later. Of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so different from the rest of the text now of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is composed of verses recited by Sanaka Rishi, Sutta Goswami, Sukadeva Goswami, and other great personalities, these first verses, they were directly spoken by Vyasadeva himself. So this is like Vyasadeva writing the preface for his book. So in the next two verses, 114, 115, Vyasadeva, he quickly describes, the scenario of the Bhagavatam, and then he begins the description of the talks of the sages in the forest of Naimisharanya. So these talks are going to be the topic for the next session of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So for this first session, the homework is that you can read the introduction of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that is this explanation of the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Prabhupada wrote, right? The whole introduction and these first three verses that we studied today. Okay, these verses are a little long because the purports, they're very, very profound, but no, that's what you can study for today. And then next time we will start with studying the first chapters, these conversations between the sages in the forest of Naimisharanya. So, okay, there is one extra here. How to defeat Mayavada philosophy using the Vedanta Sutra. So I will finish this session and then we can vote if you want to see or not this part here, okay? So I will stop the recording here and I will start another one for the questions.